Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. I'm so excited to be back into doing another Halloween video. So for today's video, I'm using the Mama Elephant Plushoween stamp set, which is beyond adorable. So I have some Bristol smooth cardstock here, and I put it into my mini MISTI. And then I lined up all the images from the set, and I'm stamping them with Hero Art's Intense Black ink. And I'm stamping them twice, so I get a really good, crisp black image here. And I chose Bristol Smooth because I wanted to use my Clean Color Real Brush markers, and these markers work so well on this cardstock. They just move really, really easily. Distress inks work really well. Well, I'm going to show some sponging with distress inks, but if you wanted to watercolor with distress inks, it works really well on this cardstock too. So I stamped the images, and then I stamped the candy corn multiple times just because there's, there was open spaces, and I love the image of candy corn for Halloween cards. I've said this before, I don't actually like candy corn. I'm not a fan, but it's cute. So I stamped it that multiple times, and then I'm getting into coloring. So I included the colors I used on the screen here. I started out with just coloring the actual little animals themselves, and I kept it simple. I thought about doing, the bear brown and each animal kind of a different color scheme. But since I ended up making 3 cards and knew I was going to use all these images, I just wanted to keep it simple. So I colored them all the same color, and I just used some dark gray, and then I blended that out a little bit with the cool gray, and then I'm using my water brush to pull the color out more and just give it more of a lighter blend. So I did all of that first, and there was areas here and there that I missed, but as I would go along, I would catch them and then fill those areas in. So I did all of that, and the little pads of their feet, and that I used the lightest ground, but you can't really see it, so I'm going to deal with that at the end of all my coloring here. And then use that light carmine for the inside of their ears. And then I'm going to go on and start coloring their accessories. So I just used the black marker, obviously, to do the hat, and then their little masks. So cute. Seriously, could not get over how adorable this set is. So I did that, and then I used just plain orange for, the candy corn, the little trick-or-treat basket, the band on the hat, and the pumpkin. And the pumpkin suit I colored right over the face because I'm going to just fill that in with black anyways. There was no point just, wasting the time going around it. And then I used purple for parts of their little outfits and everything, and then yellow for that candy corn and for the little tiny button on his cape. And then I took the black again, and that's where I filled in that little pumpkin face just to make my life simple. And then for their noses, I used natural gray because I wanted something slightly different than the black, and that I didn't blend it, I just colored it straight on. Then a little bit of brown for the stem of the pumpkin, a little bit of green for the little carrot, and then I used shadow mauve for their little bellies and the pads of their feet. It just gave it a little extra something. So once I was done all my coloring and everything was dry, I used the coordinating die set and taped all these dies into place with just little bits of washi tape. And I was very OCD about taping down all these dies since, I did an entire panel with all this coloring. I wanted to make sure these dies stayed in place and didn't shift so that, when I run it through my machine, we're good to go. So die cut everything. And then I took more pieces of the Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I'm using the ACCESSORY pumpkin wafer die set from Mama Elephant, and I ended up taping the face dies with the washi tape, and it all just happened to stay together, so I was able to die cut the face from the center of the pumpkin, and again did that 3 times. So I have all these little die cut pieces from Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I put all of this on scratch paper, and this is where I'm using my distress inks to sponge the color. And distress inks, if you've never used them on Bristol Smooth, oh, it's life-changing. Because there's that coating on Bristol Smooth cardstock, distress inks just blend even better than butter. I can't even explain how nice it is. And not just distress inks, really any dye ink blends like a dream on Bristol Smooth. So it didn't take very long to sponge all of these pieces. I just went from one color to the next. So I sponged all the pumpkins with obviously carved pumpkin, and then I did some squares with mustard seed that I'm going to back the pumpkins with. And then the stems, I used gathered twigs, and you can see I'm using a sticky note here. That's to keep my fingers from having to hold these pieces because when you're sponging, your fingerprints will leave marks. So I use my little sticky note to kind of keep my fingers as off of it as possible. I still got ink all over. My nails are stained from this. I had fun. I had so much fun. So I used mowed lawn for the die cut leaves and little die cut swirl little tendrils for the vines. And then I decided to bring in a little bit of ripe persimmon to the tops and bottoms of the pumpkins, just to deepen it that little bit. And plus it kind of made it match a little bit more with the orange of the clean color rail brush marker. So just a really light hand with that. And then I die cut even more Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I was using the My Favorite Things Grassy Fields Die-namics, as well as one of the My Favorite Things A2 rectangle stacks set 1. I think the second largest is what I ended up using. Second or third, I can't remember, but it was one of those rectangle sets because I use them for everything. So I sponged on the mowed lawn onto the grass pieces, obviously. And then for the rectangles of Bristol Smooth, I'm using the My Favorite Things Cloud stencil and shaded lilac distress ink. And it just, if you don't have this cloud stencil, there's two. There's this one and then there's the mini cloud stencil. These are so much fun. I love. So I would just rotate the stencil. Sponge on a bit of ink, rotate it again, sponge on some ink, rotate it again, and just, I've sped this up obviously quite a bit, but it still took like no time to create these fun little backgrounds. So I just kept dragging that ink off the stencil onto the cardstock, and I created this really nice light. I wanted it to be pale because I want the focus to be on the images. So created my little background, set those aside, and then I laid out all of these die cut pieces that I'd sponged, and I'm just picking up clean water with a paintbrush and tapping that paintbrush against my finger. I didn't want to use my distress sprayer because I didn't want big splatters of water. I just wanted little droplets all over the place. So let that sit for roughly a minute, and then pick up that water with my paper towel, and I've got that fun splattery look on all those die cut pieces. And again, set those aside. I went back to my little backgrounds here and I lined these up in my MISTI so I can stamp the sentiments I wanted to use, as well as there's this little cobweb stamp in the set that I thought was really cute. So I decided to stamp the cobweb and the sentiments with that same black ink, and had them lined up in my MISTI because I knew I was going to have to stamp those sentiments probably more than once because there's more solid areas to them. So did that, and I also would move the cobweb around in a couple of them just so they're not all, exactly the same. So one of them, it has, one little cobweb, and the other ones have two, but just stamped in different areas. So I used a different sentiment for each background. And once I've got all my sentiments stamped, I can now start putting together all these cards. So like I'd said, I had cut down a piece of the Bristol Smooth and sponged that mustard seed ink onto it. And then I'm going to flip around this pumpkin and just put a little bit of adhesive around the openings. And then I'm going to adhere that yellow piece so that, it's kind of glowing from the inside. Just kind of figured out where I'm going to want everything to go here. And I'm going to adhere the pumpkin. And I'm just using my Nouveau adhesive here. And it always looks like I'm using more on camera than I'm really using. Never need too much of this. It is a very strong adhesive. Less is more. You don't want blobs of it oozing out, and plus it will make your cardstock, especially if you're using thinner cardstock. Like I use, the Bristol Smooth is a heavyweight, and then I stick to like heavyweight brands of cardstock so they don't buckle. If you're using thinner, lighter weight cardstocks, they can warp really, really easily. So for all of this, like I said though, I'm using Bristol Smooth for everything. So I'm just adhering all my different little elements together to make my fun little pumpkin scene. So just adding little dabs of the glue and then pressing it into place. And then while I was doing all this, I'd kind of mentally figured out which images I wanted to use with which sentiment to create my little scene. So same thing, I'm just adding adhesive to the back of all these little die cut characters and then adhering them into place. So I used these two on this first card and added a little bit of that candy corn die cuts here. And then once I had the first one done, did the same thing with the second two. I'm going to, it started with just adhering the pumpkins and the grass, and then started all over the place, kind of adhering the characters, adhering the little swirl, vine tendrils and leaves, and same thing, putting them on either sides just to mix things up so that these aren't all, exactly the same. So adhered my little characters, figured out where I was going to place that little spider, and thought it would be fitting to place him like actually on his little web. So press that into place, and then like I said, I had those extra little candy corn die cuts, so I'm going to adhere all of those. And then for my card bases, I chose a purple cardstock that was very similar to that shaded lilac distress ink. So this is My Favorite Things Wild Wisteria cardstock. So I've got 3 pieces of that cut to 4 1/4 by 11 inches. All of them scored 5 1/2 with my Teflon bone folder. So they'll be top folding A2 sized cards. So once I have all my card bases made, I'm going to stamp the insides of all 3 cards. And same thing, I like super sped up this in the editing process just because it's really basic. I just inked up the web from the set with that same Here Arts black ink and then stamped it in the top corners of all the insides. And then I just used the same little images, but this time inked them up with that shaded lilac distress ink. So I stamped the little spider in the corner of each card and then stamped the coordinating little images on the inside of each card. So inked it up, stamped it, went on to the next one, and just repeated that until all 3 cards were done. Didn't stamp any sentiments, but you know, you gotta have something on the inside of the card. It bothers me when they're blank. So I stamped the little images, and then I made sure when I adhere all the card fronts that I adhered the right card fronts to the right bases so that, you know, the character on the outside is the same character that's stamped on the inside. And then I adhered all the card bases just flat to the card. All of this could have been popped up too with foam tape to give it, you know, a ton of dimension. That'd be so much fun. But sometimes it's fun to just make flatter cards that are easier to send through the mail. Plus, I'm positive, almost 100% positive, at least with Canada Post, I think they've narrowed the dimensions for mailing cards because I've been mailing a lot with these giveaways for Halloween and whatnot. And I'm pretty sure the slot that they measure them by now is smaller than it used to be. So I don't mind paying the extra for postage, but for some people I know that bothers them. So sometimes being able to create some flat cards is just nicer. So after everything was adhered, of course I had to add some little embellishments. So I'm using some glow-in-the-dark Nouveau drops. I will have a picture of these at the end. They glow amazingly. Like even in just natural light, they're so bright. Like they just look like they would glow in the dark. So I used apple sour and banana split. I wish there was a purple glow in the dark as well. That would be amazing. But there's not, so I just used the gloss in crushed grape. So those little dots obviously don't glow, but the green and the yellow ones do, and they're so fun. And like I said, I have a picture at the end. I went into my bathroom that doesn't have a window and shut the door and then took a picture with my phone in the dark so you can see them like glowing super bright. It's just so much fun. So I did that and then set these aside for several hours to dry. Technically, Nouveau recommends that you let them dry for, I think, 24 hours. So definitely let them dry completely and then they're good to go. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have links to all the supplies used. You can check that out in the description box below the video as well as on my blog. Thank you guys so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.